We are also joined by another real champion of these issues, but before I invite him to the podium, I wanted to appropriately recognize the national president of LULAC, Ms. Rosa Rosales. I didn't do so earlier because I was waiting on her to actually get in, so good morning, and thank you very much for being with us. We are very pleased to have, as I said earlier, another champion, Congressman Mike Honda, who has agreed to join us this morning to share with us a few of his thoughts and his perspective. So let me invite Congressman Honda up at this point.
I'm so glad you made it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's cool you get abrazos, huh? And I'm Asian. You got it. Thank you very much for having me, and bienvenidos a todos acá en capital de Washington, D.C. Good to see my friend Sal Alvarez from San Jose. Real quick, I know that you got our panelists here, so we want to get to them right away, but I just want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Hinojosa, Grijalva, for working on this get-together, and including myself in this whole planning and discussion. The coalition building, I think, that you need to know that's going on in Congress is one that's viable. We put together a tri-caucus of the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. We number approximately 74 members. That's leverage. And so when we talk about education, we talk about the kinds of things that our students need in terms of protecting their rights to equitable education, looking at their language and respecting it and using language as a instructional tool. We have 74 members that will stand there for those children. We will stand against anybody who tries to say that English only is the only way to instruct our people. It's like Mr. Hinojosa said, that we're talking to the choir, but I think sometimes we need to look at the music sheet and see if we can sing in harmony. And that's why you have choir practice. And that's why you have prayer meetings, right? And to the Presidenta, good to see you. And I'm glad that LULAC is here, and the other members from the different communities, CIRAC, and so that we have a well-rounded audience here to talk about high school equity in our high schools. And that really means to me that we have people out there who recognize that our youngsters are not getting equitable opportunities to education. And it doesn't matter whether you come from Palo Alto or from East St. Louis. The fact remains that equity doesn't exist in our school system today as we see it. We may think it is, or we may think that we're moving towards it, but I think that as we look at our school districts, we make that attempt, but a lot of times I think that we mistake parity for equity. And what I mean by that is that we fund our schools through ADA, and I think that needs to be questioned. And I think that some of us have a sense that that's not equity, so we have things like ESEA, Title I, we have No Child Left Behind efforts, we have gifted programs for children, but all that just speaks to the idea that there's a sense of inequity in our schools and for our students, whether they're gifted or whether they're just like me, normal. And so I think that pursuit of equity is important. It was Lau versus Nicholas mentioned, where Chinese families in San Francisco had to fight the school boards to allow language to be used as a vehicle for instruction. And that's what it's all about, I think, for us. 227 in California was passed. It's an initiative, terrible initiative, that said to our children that, they have to learn English and they have to learn the content area in the language that they don't completely comprehend. And educators, we have to understand how to be able to be good advocates for our kids. In the area of planning and community planning, I think that at some point in time we have to start understanding that our communities are segregated by zoning laws. And whether you're new arrivals, we tend to group together by language because it's comfortable, but a lot of times, because of our income, we're relegated to areas that are impacted by low-cost housing and things like that. And a lot of times, our schools do not respond to our community in a proper way. Let me close with this idea that, one, I would hope that we all have this sense that Asian Americans are not held up as model minorities. I think it's nice that we have a good expectation, but if you do that, then there are a lot of other communities in the Asian American communities that need to be disaggregated so that their needs and those children's needs are addressed properly. What it also says is that the other children from the other groups must not be as good as. Because as a school teacher and as a principal, I remember hearing teachers saying, oh good, look at, I got a whole list of Asian kids. That was a comment that said more than what was said. It was telling me some of their attitudes towards other students. And if a teacher says that in a classroom, what kind of message does that send to other kids? So language is very important in how we use language and how our attitudes are. And all those things that we studied in college about expectations, it still works out. It still is there. And I think that in terms of being people of color, whether you're Native Americans or you're Latinos or African Americans or you come from Europe, the context of our culture is important so that the words that we use in instruction is accurate and it doesn't put children apart or put them aside. Because I think that our language that we bring with us is the vehicle of our transmission of our culture. And when we impose English on top of that, sometimes the language of instruction is different from the language of the playground. We can't assume that just because a child looks like they're English dominant, that they understand every terminology we use in a classroom. We have to remember to be able to check that out. So equity runs for everything from the kinds of descriptions that Jonathan Colso describes in his last book, Shame of a Nation, chapter 10. You have to look at that to understand that sometimes our schools have to be modified to address those youngsters. I was a principal of an elementary school that had Cambodians, Vietnamese, Latinos, and we didn't have bilingual Cambodian, we didn't have bilingual Vietnamese. Órale pues, que te vaya bien, que te vaya muy bonito. But we had bilingual Spanish. So it was incumbent upon us in education to understand that if we had bilingual Spanish, then we should apply the same principles to the other language groups. And so in our school, we had bilingual Vietnamese and Cambodian and Spanish. And on weekends, we had Cambodian school and Vietnamese school. And the reason that's important is because they need to maintain the language and strengthen that language so they can be successful in the English language too. And besides, the school belongs to the community, not to the classroom teacher. So I would recommend that everybody who comes from impacted neighborhoods make sure that those schools are open on weekends and utilized for those kids, because the parents will appreciate it and they become your colleagues and your allies in the youngsters' education. And so I just want to thank all of you for your interest and your passion for our children. And to our panelists, I want to thank you for the kind of information you'll be sharing, and that we can reach this issue of equity if we understand that sometimes we're working at symptoms and not the causes. But as long as we're working at symptoms and understand where the cause is, we may make some progress. So in the name of the children, thank you.